In the early 18th century, Britain stood on the edge of political chaos. The year was 1715, and the kingdom was deeply divided. On one side sat the newly crowned King George I, representing the Hanoverian dynasty. On the other stood James Francis Edward Stuart, the exiled son of King James II, who claimed the throne as his rightful inheritance. This conflict was not merely political. It was personal, emotional, and deeply rooted in loyalty and identity. Supporters of James, known as Jacobites, believed the monarchy had been unjustly taken from the Stuart line. Among these loyalists was a man named William Maxwell, the 5th Earl of Nithsdale. William Maxwell was not a reckless rebel. He was a nobleman, a man of honor, and above all, a devoted supporter of the Stuart cause. When the Jacobite Rising of 1715 began, he joined it with conviction, believing he was fighting for justice and legitimacy. However, the rebellion was poorly coordinated and ultimately failed. The consequences were swift and brutal. Maxwell was captured, arrested, and charged with high treason. The trial was little more than a formality. The outcome was already decided: guilty. The sentence was clear and merciless: death by execution. He was transferred to the Tower of London, one of the most secure and feared prisons in the kingdom. Its thick stone walls had held kings, traitors, and enemies of the crown for centuries. Escape from the tower was considered impossible. Inside his cold, dimly lit cell, William Maxwell awaited his fate. The date of execution was set: February 24th, 1716. Only days remained. While Maxwell faced his final hours in captivity, his wife, Winifred Maxwell, when she heard the news of her husband's sentence, it felt as though the world had collapsed around her. But grief did not break her. Instead, it ignited something stronger: determination. Winifred was not an ordinary woman. She was intelligent, composed, and fiercely loyal. Where others saw a hopeless situation, she saw a challenge, and she made a decision. She would save her husband, no matter the cost. In the days leading up to the execution, Winifred visited the tower repeatedly. She spoke with guards, pleaded with officials, and searched desperately for any possible solution. Each time, she was met with the same reality: there would be no mercy. The system was rigid. The decision was final. But Winifred refused to accept defeat. If the law would not save her husband, then she would outsmart it. Slowly, a plan began to take shape in her mind. It was bold, dangerous, and almost unthinkable, but it was possible. On February 23rd, 1716, the night before the execution, Winifred made her move. She arrived at the tower with a small group of trusted women, her maid and 2 close companions. Their presence raised no suspicion. Women were often allowed to visit prisoners, especially those facing execution. They were searched, but only lightly. No one imagined that these women posed any threat. That assumption would prove to be the greatest mistake. Inside the prison, Winifred maintained her composure. She spoke calmly, showed no sign of panic, and followed every protocol. Eventually, she was granted access to her husband's cell. The moment the heavy door closed behind them, everything changed. Time was running out. She turned to William and spoke quietly but firmly. "Tonight you are leaving this place." At first he was stunned. Escape from the tower seemed impossible, but there was no time for doubt. The plan had already begun. The women revealed what they had concealed beneath their clothing: extra garments. Carefully and quickly, they dressed William in women's attire: a long gown, layered fabric, and a shawl that would obscure his face. His features were hidden as much as possible. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. Then came the most astonishing part of the plan. Winifred removed her own outer garments and prepared to take her husband's place. She would stay behind. She would sit in the cell, disguised, eyes pretending to be the condemned man. Her courage was beyond comprehension. If discovered, she would face severe punishment, perhaps even death. But she did not hesitate. This was not just an escape. It was a sacrifice. Once William was fully disguised, the women prepared to leave. Winifred positioned herself carefully, keeping her face hidden, mimicking the posture of a man awaiting execution. In the dim light of the cell, with limited visibility, the illusion was convincing enough. The door opened. The women exited the cell, guiding William among them as if he were one of their own. They approached the first checkpoint. A guard stopped them. "Who is this?" One of the women answered calmly. "A friend. She is overcome with grief and cannot remain here any longer." The guard glanced briefly but did not investigate further. Emotional women were not uncommon in such places, especially on the eve of an execution. He waved them through. The first barrier was behind them, but the most dangerous part still lay ahead. The main gate. This was where multiple guards stood watch. This was where scrutiny was highest. One mistake could end everything. As they approached, tension filled the air. Then, at the perfect moment, one of the women began to act. She broke into loud, uncontrollable sobs. Her cries echoed through the corridor. "I cannot bear this! I cannot stay here!" Her performance was powerful, emotional, and utterly convincing. The guards were caught off guard. Their attention shifted entirely to her. And in that single moment, the opportunity appeared. William, still disguised, walked quietly past them. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. He passed through the gate. And just like that, he was free. Outside the tower, arrangements had already been made. Transportation was waiting. The escape did not end at the gate. It was only the beginning. Meanwhile, inside the cell, Winifred remained perfectly still. She maintained the illusion for as long as necessary, ensuring that no suspicion would arise too soon. Eventually, when the time was right, she found her own way out. Her role was complete. The next morning, guards arrived to prepare the prisoner for execution. They unlocked the cell and froze. The room was empty. For a moment, silence filled the space. Then chaos erupted. "He's gone!" The alarm spread rapidly. Officials were stunned. The Tower of London, considered impenetrable, had been breached, not by force, but by deception. Search parties were dispatched across the city. Roads were monitored. Ships were inspected. But it was too late. William Maxwell had already escaped England. He eventually made his way to Rome, where many Jacobite exiles had gathered. Weeks later, Winifred joined him there. Their reunion was not just emotional, it was extraordinary. It is said that when they met again, William spoke with deep gratitude. "You have given me life again." And Winifred, with quiet strength, replied, "This was not the work of a man. It was the courage of a woman." Their story became one of the most remarkable escape tales in history, not because of violence, not because of power, but because of intelligence, courage, and unwavering love.